Well, Megan said, you know, if we're done with the
He is interested in that.
I had one, but I think it's.
Anyone have a spare tissue pen?
I can go get one.
I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
I'm a note taker. I'm gonna be a note taker. So, is you good?
I am so excited. I know it's numbers, but I'm so excited.
Good when people get that excited.
Yeah, I was working on the presentation today and putting some, pie charts together, and then I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 2 minutes to get to the restaurant. I had a meeting, I had an appointment. So, yeah, I like
I
numbers.
used to have a secretary, she was the best. She would walk in and she'd say, I'm gonna hand you this, you're gonna use that at the meeting. You need to be at the office.
I love
She never would be, she was not judgy. She's just.
You're gonna need that.
I've got your court warning for you now.
Oh, that is so
She was the
awesome.
best. Everybody needs one.
Yeah, I can really, really dig into those numbers.
There's a legal case of Justin Richmond. Now, say Johnny mowed the yards. I'm really.
All right. All right, it is 5:30, and we will begin our city special call meeting. Can I hear a roll call, please?
Councilor Warren is absent. Councilor Belli,
Here.
Mayor Hickman,
Here.
Councilor Barton,
Here.
and Vice Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum, so we will begin, and we'll begin with item number 3. Consideration of acceptance, approval, adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of a public hearing for the fiscal year 2025 through 2026 budget for the General Fund, Airport Fund, Cemetery, Perpetual Care Fund, Disaster Emergency Fund, Health Department Fund, Police Drug Fund, Recreation Fund, and CIP Fund. Ms. Andrea.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you would allow me to make one presentation that covers all 3, and then maybe we can just go from this item to the Public Works Authority and then to the Economic Development Authority and then back to our executive session, because this really explains it all. Again, this is for our proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. Just to share this with everyone, the budget really works with 3 different types of revenues. We have recurring revenues, which we can reasonably expect every single year. There are some periodic revenues. We do receive community development block grants quite often, but they are tied to a certain time frame or to certain conditions, as are other grants. And then we also have a significant number of one-time revenues. Those would be our fund balances. Once we spend those, they're gone, or we have to replenish them specifically. American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funding, which we've largely used for water and sewer infrastructure. Loans from the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, again, it's just one-time revenue. Once it's been used, it's gone. The majority of federal and state grants falls into that category, and of course, as you can imagine, donations.
But these federal money, we're not sure about that.
Right now, I am grateful that we don't have any federal money because everything is a little up in the air. And
Yes.
then- So this
I know
is
there's going to be a lot of cutbacks and money not, yeah.
correct. And luckily, that does not affect our current budget because we did not have an active federal grant. The grants that we had that were funneled through OWRB for our infrastructure, they are set and they cannot be retrieved. So this does not affect our current budget, and there is no risk of that happening. Recurring revenue sources are very important, and this is probably my soapbox and may not be known by all citizens. Recurring source for municipal governments in Oklahoma is related to sales and use tax. That's it. And then whatever fees we bring in versus other local governments have a variety of funding sources that we do not currently have access to unless it goes to a special vote to the people. So it puts us in a little bit precarious situation because when you put all your eggs in one basket and that basket is not producing very well that year and sales tax is always very volatile, that puts us in a bind or could put us in a bind. One other thing that is very important to understand, per Oklahoma statutes, anytime we make an interfund transfer, as in we take, for example, for our loans that we receive for water and sewer infrastructure, we have to pledge our sales and use tax. So we have to take the entirety of the sales and use tax that the city of Eufaula receives, transfer it into the Public Works Authority. So it's counted as revenue on the city side and then pushed out as a disbursement. So counts as revenue, counts as expenditure, and then it shows up again as revenue on the Public Works Authority side. So in some cases, when you see the budget is $30 million, just remember that some of that is interfund transfer and it's actually counted twice. So this is why that has to be done. That is a state requirement. It's, again, not very well understood. So if somebody just looks at the very large budget summary and looks at all of the money we have, some of it is actually money counted twice because of this very requirement. Here are the budgeted fund transfers. You also have this in your budget book that was sent out with the agenda. It is contained on page 27, if I remember correctly. So here you will see that the mandatory transfer of sales tax to the Public Works Authority, again, that was a condition of receiving the loans through the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. We do that in line 1, and then in line 3, you will see that for the use tax as well. And then farther down, you will see that most of that money is actually transferred back to the general fund just by virtue of, as we had discussed, our Public Works Authority is getting to the point of being self-sustaining, a true enterprise fund. And so most of that money can then flow back into the general fund because we need it for public safety and everything else. But these are all of the fund transfers. It is an easy way to track these. And again, that is contained in your budget book. Municipal funds, we primarily work with these 3 categories, and that is why we actually have 3 meetings all rolled into one evening. This first part is, of course, for the city of Eufaula. These are all of the funds that are governed by the city of Eufaula. They each have particular functions. The general fund covers all of our general government services that you can think of. We do have a specialty airport fund because we do receive the occasional Federal Aviation Administration money, and it has to be accounted for separately, as do any kind of revenues that are gained on the airport property. Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, again, in line with state requirements, we have to have that. Disaster Emergency Fund, it's always good to have that separate because Ideally, you want to stock that fund up in case you need it. And when you don't need it, you just leave it alone so it can stay there. A police account fund, drug fund, those were set. Same with the recreation fund and the Arvest and South Point project fund. We have not used in a number of years, but it is a fund for us. Pivoting to the Follow Public Works Authority, there we have our, of course, our regular Works Authority fund, out of which we pay all of our staff for the operation of water treatment, water distribution, sewer treatment, as well as sewer collection, and anything that is associated with that. Our meter fund, every time somebody gets a new service or a new utility account, they have to deposit money. That is where that money goes, because we hold that separate. When the account is closed out and everything is balanced out, the refund of the deposit is made out of that account. We do have the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. That is actually money that we receive through OWRB. And again, we want to track it separately because there are stringent requirements for the administration of those loans, and mixing and mingling that with operational funding on our side is not a good idea. And then, of course, there's money set aside for capital improvements, and that is located in the CIP. Again, pivoting to the next category of funding is for the Eufaula Economic Development Authority. It is that was also set up for the benefit of the city, very much like the Eufaula Public Works Authority, and there the money is tracked separately from everything else the city does. In terms of how this budget was created, of course, it has to be compliant with the Oklahoma Constitution. We can only collect taxes and fees for public purposes, so we're not allowed to give it to private corporations or individuals. Every time you hear the gift of public funding, that is what this refers to. It is governed by the Municipal Budget Act, meaning that our anticipated revenues for the year, because we're estimating and projecting everything out for the year, the revenues have to be at least equal to or larger than our anticipated expenditures. We cannot run a deficit. By state law, our budget has to be balanced. Then, of course, you will remember from our April 2025 meeting, the City Council adopted budgeting and financial planning policies. So we now also have operating reserves and contingency reserves. The operating reserves reside outside of the budget. So that is what the ending fund balance is. And for those funds that operate, for the general fund, it has to be at least 14%, which gives us coverage for about 2 months worth of operation. For other operating funds, it can be 5 to 20%. In this case, that would be the Public Works Authority Fund. That is the other fund that supports operation and staff. There is a contingency reserve that is already in the budget. Should fuel prices go up or other cost increases happen in the middle of the year, we can fall back onto those contingency funds without having to cut services or without having to cut anything else. That money is available. And then, of course, the budget year runs from July 1st through June 30 of the next year, and we are under the requirement to adopt our budget annually. Budget development, this is truly in the order of priority. The first thing we always consider is the staff we already have. We want to make sure that we continue with the staff who's knowledgeable, who understands the operation. We include their wages, potential increases, although this year that's not quite the case. I'll happily talk about that here in a moment. Any kind of fringe benefits and any kind of scheduled merit steps. Because we want to make sure that they have everything we need for payroll. They have the necessary training for all of their certifications that are required for water treatment and sewer treatment. Then the next critical step is, of course, what are our big projects that we absolutely need to have. And you may remember me talking about $200,000 for our lift station repair. that's also been included because that's a critical capital project. And then, of course, the operational expenses, because it does not make any sense to push everything into labor when we don't have enough money to then buy the supplies to actually do the operations. Only when those two items are covered, then do we look at additional training, potential program changes, or improved activities, or other requests for adding staff. And I can tell you right away, there's no staff additions this year. There is a little bit of reshuffling itself, minor, within the budget, but there is no additional staff anticipated for the next fiscal year. And also no additional programs or other programmatic changes. That was not in the budget. Here is a budget summary, and this one really focusing on the second portion of your handout. At the top of this budget summary that you have, that is all of the different types of revenues. What is shown on the screen and on the bottom half of your handout, that is all of the expenditures. And so it's laid out by all of the different funds. Again, within those three categories, the first is the City of Eufaula. Then we have the Public Works Associated funds, and then, of course, the Economic Development Authority Fund. And then on the right-hand side, you see all of the expenditures across, and also the estimated fund balances right there at the bottom. And you can see that our general fund, which supports staff and operations, meets that criteria of 14% fund balance, aka operating reserve, as does our Public Works Fund, because those are the funds that support staff and operations. The other funds, in some cases, you see, increases in the fund balance. That is neither here nor there. It's great to see that because we never want to spend more money than we're actually taking in. But if we get to the point of having more money than maybe needed for that year's operation, it carries over to the next year, and then we can do a bigger project category. So it is not lost by any means. Here are just a few pie charts to help you understand where most of our funding sources come from the general fund. We do have 8.7 million, almost 3 million out of that is fund balance, which we should not generally touch. The fund balance was, when we start off with the next fiscal year, will be 14.5%, and we're reducing this slightly. This first year, implementing the budgeting and financial planning policies are a little tight, just by virtue of you're setting aside the 14% for the operating reserve, and then you're carving out another 2% for contingency reserve. So we are spending that fund balance down just a little bit, but by a lesser amount than we're taking and putting into reserves. And that is exactly where we want to be, which also means next year, when the budget cycle comes around again, because that money has already been put in reserve, all you need to do is just stock it up to the appropriate expenditure budgets, 2%, 14%, and that is much, much easier to do than doing it the first year. A large portion of our general fund budget comes from taxes. As you can see, the description right there is from left to right, top to bottom. Licenses and permits are 0.2% of our overall general fund budget. Charges for services are relatively small too, at 0.4%. Fines and forfeitures, 1.8%, and that is mostly court fines, citations. That is where those come into play. Interest, it looks like we're not getting into any interest, but we do get interest. It's just very small in comparison to the 8.7 million. And then, of course, some miscellaneous, it could be different grants. There's not really a good category to just, otherwise we'd have a whole bunch of 0% everywhere. And then transfers in. Remember, we have to transfer a whole lot of the sales and use tax out to the general fund, but then we're transferring it back in. So that is why you see those two replicated right here. For expenditures, we're using 7.6 million for the general fund expenditures. And here it is shown by the different departments. That is how that shapes up. The transfers out, again, transferring out the sales and use tax. What you see here specifically in general government, that includes a lot of different things, which is why that is so large. We do have quite a bit that we're spending on our police. Public safety is very important, and we do have a career police department versus the volunteer fire department. So there is a difference in the cost to run both of those. And then I did the same kind of pie graph for the Eufaula Public Works Authority, and there it is, as you can imagine, a little different. We do have a larger fund balance to start with. We do receive charges for services, and remember, this is an enterprise fund that has to pay for itself. So the charges for services are a significant portion of that revenue. Just a small percentage of interest, some miscellaneous, such as loan payments and OWRB grants that we've received. And then, of course, the transfers in that came from the general fund in the form of sales and use tax. And then on the expenditure side, you will see the transfers out, again, the very large piece on the left-hand side, and we're using it for a lot of capital improvements. Almost 21% of our Public Works Authority expenditures are going to be put into capital improvements. We do have a garbage collection service contract that comes out of that fund, Public Works Administration, of course, a sewer service, water service, and then debt service, because in order to update our water sewer lines and water treatment and wastewater treatment plants, we had to get loans, and we do have to pay those back over the next decades. The last one will be paid off, if I remember my chart correctly, it was 2052-ish.
Do you remember the total for that loan?
Of debt? Oh, no, I don't.
Okay.
I could run back to the
No,
office.
no worries. No worries.
I do know that at this time, we have a current annual debt load of 1.228 million across the board for all of the different loans that we have. And of course, over time, those will drop off. And that was a whole lot of explanation. So Mr. Mayor, we are ready for our public hearing at this point in time.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
That's a lot of money.
It is.
I really appreciate the explanation, breaking that down for everyone, for all of us to understand that better.
Yes. Anything else?
Open the public hearing.
Oh, okay. Yes, and at this time, we'll open the public hearing if anyone would like to speak.
Okay, so I have a question. So do we not have any grants that cover a lot of?
If you don't
this
mind,
stuff?
yeah, if you don't mind coming up to the podium right here. Yes, please.
Do we not have a lot of grants that cover some of this stuff, like our sewer and our, our water plants and stuff like that? I thought at the last meeting it was mentioned, Jeb had mentioned about some grants or something. So I'd like some clarification on that, because that's a lot of money to be in debt.
So during the public hearing, we can't answer your question, but when we close out, I'll come back to your question.
Okay.
That was a great comment. Anybody else at this time? Do you mind touching a little bit? Because I think there was some with the public here recently about the capital improvement fund, the CIP fund.
We should close out the public
Okay,
hearing.
I'm sorry.
and
Yes.
then-
Any other comments? No comments. Okay. Well, we will close the public hearing.
So some additional questions that will often come up is, are there not grants available to cover some of these particularly capital projects? At this point in time, most of those capital projects are actually loan funded. There are a few grants available, and I know that at the April meeting, for example, we had Ms. Sheila Edwards here to write a grant for a sewer improvement, but those numbers are much smaller than what is required for the overall system update. Sometimes we are fortunate, and OWRB allows us to take $1 million off one of our loans. That is a loan forgiveness program, so it works kind of like a grant. But in the grand scheme of things, there are not enough grants to sustain the system. There's not enough grant funding available at the state level.
And we're not the only ones applying for grants. You've got all the communities applying for
It
these
is.
grants, so it's, sometimes we get lucky.
Highly competitive, and sometimes we do get lucky. In terms of the CIP fund, there is a certain amount that is collected and pushed into the CIP fund specifically for a portion, $1.65 goes towards the payoff for the automatic meter readers we have, and the remainder of that goes into the CIP fund for the capital improvements, which allows us then to go in and replenish the system, because a system, water and sewer system, and particularly the treatment plants, which are a little aged, they require constant repair. We had one of our clarifier motors go out, and that alone was $118,000. And again, diesel lift station just requires the motors to be rebuilt. And the Public Works Director choked just a little bit when he received the first quote for $200,000. So this infrastructure is very expensive.
And one of the reasons why we had to take out the current loan for it is just poor planning, would you say, or was it?
It was a combination of multiple things, and I know that we had a very hard discussion about inflation, inflationary increases in the water and sewer rates. Our water and sewer rates until about 2018 had been held artificially low by putting more of the general fund money into the Public Works Authority fund and being that backstop for an enterprise fund that really should have sustained itself. And so the system was not, there was a lot of deferred maintenance. And with the application to OWRB for the loans, and we have received multiple of those loans, the latest one in 2021, that allowed us to replace water and sewer lines citywide. It did not touch everything on the water treatment and sewer treatment plant. I know that we received another OWRB grant specific for the wastewater treatment plant. But yeah, that was necessary in order to work on that very long backlog of deferred maintenance, because we had not put any investment into the system for so many years.
Okay.
But if I understand this correctly, by us working our way into the water sewer system sustaining itself, and us not having to take money out of the general fund to sustain it, we will put ourselves in a place where our general fund should be able to increase, and hopefully in the future, we won't have to take out as many loans as we have taken out in the past.
Correct. Correct. What it will also allow us to do, I can tell you that we do have some difficulties holding on to staff. And just by virtue of, we do have some jobs that require physical labor, and in some cases it is It is more comfortable to go flip a burger and make the same amount of money than it is to be out there in the field and mow a park and empty a trash can. And so right now, our general fund, it was curtailed by virtue of previously pushing money into the Public Works Authority Fund. And so that is rectifying one of those issues because we want to pay our staff appropriately.
Ms. Andre, can you also just discuss a little bit about the recreational account and as well? Do you remember?
Yes, Valerie? Yes. Thank you.
The recreation account is fed by the hotel motel tax. 5% of the recreation of the hotel motel tax feeds into recreation for
Okay.
parks, recreation, fireworks comes out of recreation every year. So it funds those things like the park equipment that we put in the separate places, helping with the splash pad. A lot of that was a grant. Half of it was a matching grant and fundraiser, but the city did put into that out of the recreation account. So all of those parks and splash pad and fireworks festivities are funded from that department, but that it's fed by the 5% of the hotel motel tax.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is that 5%?
Yes,
We can increase that at times, can't we?
it has to go to a vote of the people.
And
Let's go through the voted people.
our entire hotel motel tax is actually 9%.
Because 4%.
Correct. 5% go into the recreation fund, and the other 4% actually go into our Eufaula Economic Development
Oh, okay.
Authority fund. So we're already at 9%.
And I know this is overall compared to other places. I mean, is that kind of average?
It has become relatively normal. I know that when it was first implemented, 9% was relatively high, but there are other municipalities who stopped at 5, some stopped at 7, some have gone all the way to 12 and 15%. It is all over the place.
Okay.
Do you mind explaining a little bit what the Economic Development Fund takes care of? What are some of the things that's paying?
So ideally, the Economic Development Fund is used to drive businesses to Eufaula. That can be done in multiple different ways. Oftentimes, the Economic Development Fund is used for marketing to entities around us, bringing people in. For example, it can be used for small incentives to businesses. It can be used to help businesses that are already located here to expand. This current fiscal year, it was used for fishing tournaments. They were thought to be an economic driver. And so in the current fiscal year, 2024-2025, all of the economic development funding actually went towards fishing tournaments.
All of the.
All of it. Mhm.
Do you,
And do we have, and I know this is just throwing this out there, and if you don't have the number tonight, I completely understand. But with all of that money going to fishing tournaments, do we have numbers to show how that affected, did it affect our sales tax revenue in a positive way? Because that's really the only way to recapture that, right?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So what I can tell you is we are a tourism community, and so our sales tax profile is slightly different than other peer entities that do not have a lake. We actually, this current year, did not have a significant dip in our sales tax. Communities that do not have a tourist attraction, such as Lake Eufaula, actually saw sales tax revenues dip below prior years. Ours did not dip below prior years. It increased, but at a modest rate. And what we received in additional sales tax barely broke even. So there is not a good way to tie these two things together. What I do know is we spent a lot of money on fishing tournaments and received more sales tax than our peers without a lake. But the return on investment, I would not put my hands into the fire that came out even. And there is truly no way to determine that
Pull
because
that apart and
unless
see.
you ask everybody who spends $1 if they came here because of a
Right.
fishing tournament
Gotcha,
or after a fishing tournament because they liked us so much.
gotcha.
Tisha, did you have something?
I did, but let me just backtrack and see what it was.
And just for the council's information, this is our public hearing. So of course, this budget will come back to you one more time. And lo and behold, as soon as it was published, I found a mistake, which is a good thing because I found one formula that did not include all of the revenue. So there's more money than is currently shown.
I did have one more question.
Yes.
The streets, the money allocated for the streets.
Uh-huh.
That's not a very big amount.
It is not.
So is this for critical repair only?
It is for critical repair only because with the funding levels that we currently have, we cannot do anything but critical repair of potholes and a potentially failing tin horn.
Okay.
Roadway infrastructure, much like sewer and water infrastructure, has become so expensive to repair. And I know that, earlier this year, there was the sales tax vote specific for streets. The per mile reconstruction cost for a roadway, we couldn't even get a quarter mile with what is shown in the budget.
Go on the hunt for some money.
Ms. Andre, how would you advise to proceed? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
There's been a lot of talk about tariffs lately and how it's going to impact everybody's income.
Yeah.
Factor that in when you plan a budget. I mean, you can anticipate increases in prices of everything, so. How do you factor that in?
There is no way to know the full impact of that. And the unfortunate truth is our residents will have to pay more, which brings in more sales tax. But on the flip side, we pay more for the services and products and everything, supplies that we need as well. So there is no good way to capture that. We estimate as carefully as possible, but ultimately we will have to wait and see how that all shakes out. It is based on best estimation. It is very difficult in this current environment to estimate.
Yeah, if you don't mind coming up here.
When we talk about the hotel motel tax, we know that I'm gonna throw a guesstimate out there that about 40% of our homeowners are vacation rentals. Does that money actually come back to the city? Would you like me to answer that?
The city's hotel motel tax is collected through the Oklahoma Tax Commission, and they do require Airbnb and Vrbo to remit that hotel motel tax to them, and then it comes back to the city. So yes, it does come back in the form of the 9% to the hotel motel tax.
How do we know it comes back?
Well, we can see a difference with when it comes back in hotel motel tax, and you can see that it rises, through the tourist season. But we also know that we can ask the Oklahoma Tax Commission for a report, and they can tell us who's reporting and who's not reporting. The city does require, if you're a homeowner, for you to ask for a variance and a permit to register your house as an Airbnb or a Vrbo. So as people come through, and I know we have some that don't, but
That's a good word.
but
I'm just being honest.
you're right.
I'm a real estate agent here,
But
so I
as-
know better. I
But
know
as
what's
we
more
do
than
have
some.
people, and we do have people that turn them in, that says, do you know this property is being used as an Airbnb? Do you know this? And then we send code enforcement out and we say, you need to get this done or we're going to have to close your Airbnb.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw someone under the bus, and it's just because it's a question. What about those who are not done through Airbnb and VRBO, i.e. Carlton Landing.
Correct. Carlton Landing is outside of the city of Eufaula, so they would
Right,
not
and-
permit to us anyway.
So, well, and that's why I asked. So
Yeah.
they do
their
have
own.
their own, but that's why I'm asking for what about play, and that's why I said, I know someone's
Yes.
gonna feel like I'm throwing them under the bus,
Well-
but that's why I asked for places like that who do it on their own, is there's no way I'm gonna guess for us to know.
We
unless
can
someone
still
turns
have them, if someone turns them into us as an Airbnb and they're not licensed or permit, we'll still go out and contact them.
Okay.
And then they have to remit to the Oklahoma Tax Commission. They would remit through their FEIN number, through their LLC, or with their social security number.
That's how I wondered. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Ms. Andre, how would you ask us to proceed?
By the power of the chair, if you would like to recess to the Public Works Authority, open up the public hearing, go through that agenda, and then do the same for the Economic Development
Okay.
Authority, and then we can come back to our executive sessions.
I'd like to say something on behalf of the streets that Tish had brought up. We had EODD come in and survey, went through the 204 streets in Eufaula. That's roughly 7.5 miles. The initial cost will be over $4 million. The city of Eufaula, in the city limits, I understand, has 40 miles of streets. So you can imagine what it would cost to pave every street, $40 million. And of course, we had the sales tax, we wanted to pass, that would help a little bit, and of course, the people voted that down. So we're gonna have these streets like they are, we can patch them and like we've been doing, until we get some funding some way to pay for those streets. But we've been here a long time, and Eufaula has, and streets are getting worse, but we'll just have to put up with it, I guess, until we can find some type of funding or something that would help us do that.
Thank you, Roger. By power of the chair, I'm going to move into the Public Works Authority and open up a public hearing for that as well. Any comments? Okay, so item 2, or I'm sorry, roll call, Ms. Valerie, I apologize. I apologize.
Counselor Warren is absent. Counselor Gully,
Here.
Mayor Hickman,
Here.
Counselor Barton,
Here,
Vice Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we'll begin. Item line number 2, consideration of acceptance, approval, adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of a public hearing for the fiscal year 2025 through 2026 budget for the Public Works Fund, Meter Fund, and Public Works CWSRF Fund. Ms. Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very similar to what we discussed previously, this is specific to the Public Works Authority and the different funds it has, which includes, of course, the PWA fund itself, the meter fund, and then also the Public Works and Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Again, we're talking about almost 9 million in total revenue. And that would include $8.8 million in expenditures. Everything else that was discussed before applies to the Public Works Authority, just like it did to the city of Eufaula. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have on those funds that are associated with the Public Works Authority, which are those 3.
I think I got mine answered earlier.
And if there are no questions, I would suggest that we open the public hearing, ask for comments, and then close the public hearing.
At this time, we'll open for a public hearing as well, if there's any comments. I do not see any comments, so we will close the public hearing as well. So I do have a question regarding the expenditures and leaving behind a 2 million fund balance. Is there any, working with our Public Works Director, are there any foreseen large expenditures of improvements that we need to consider for this coming next year?
That is an excellent question. And if we would have had more time, we would have a list of all of the important capital improvements. In general terms, the budget development usually starts early in the year, and all of the department heads submit their operation budget requests, and then everybody also submits their critical infrastructure requests. And there was unfortunately insufficient time to do so this year, which is why there is this very large fund balance. As other critical infrastructure pieces that we don't already know about at this point in time come up, because sometimes that happens, particularly with an older water treatment, an older wastewater treatment plant, that fund balance could then be appropriated as the need arises. But my recommendation to the department heads and to the staff and to the city council would be to start that discussion for capital improvements in January of 2026. So there's a solid list that can utilize this fund balance, because for one-time fund expenditures, we only need a smaller portion. We do have quite a bit of fund balance that could actually do some work for us in the form of projects. But there was insufficient time this year.
Okay. And we do appreciate your hard work on this.
Amen.
Man, it was, you hit the ground running. So we do appreciate it very much. Any action taken on this? No action?
Just the public hearing.
Okay. Okay. So item number 3, so we'll adjourn out of, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I say.
Counselor Belli,
Here?
Yes.
Mayor Hickman,
Yes.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Vice Mayor
Yes,
Morgan.
yes.
Okay, we are adjourned, and now we will move back into our regular city council meeting. Moving on to item number 4.
Mary, one more.
I'm sorry.
The economic development.
Oh, I am so sorry. I apologize. Yes, okay. Normally, it's just the Public Works. So yes, we are moving into our Eufaula Economic Development Authority. Ms. Valerie, can we have a roll call?
Counselor Warren is absent. Counselor Belli,
I'm here.
Mayor Hickman,
Here.
Counselor Barton,
Here.
Vice Mayor Morgan.
Item line number 2, consideration of acceptance, approval, adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of a public hearing for the fiscal year 2025 through 2026 budget for the Eufaula Economic Development Authority Fund. Ms. Andrea.
So again, all of the same principles for budget development apply. What is peculiar about the Economic Development Fund is that it does not support operations. So there is no staff associated with the Economic Development Fund. We do have, we're starting the year out with 0 fund balance on the Economic Development Fund. What we are taking in is revenue, $100,000 from a general fund transfer and $88,000 in anticipated hotel motel tax that is specifically assigned to economic development activities. So there will be $188,000 available for activities within the Economic Development Fund. I do know we have 2 more fishing tournaments in the next fiscal year. One in September, the other one in October. And for that, we did budget some expenditures, and we will ultimately have a fund balance after all is said and done to be able to rebuild that reserve. And then it will be ready to do something different the year thereafter.
I have a question. is it, normally, would the economic development pool, say these fishing tournaments, would they normally come out of that fund? I mean, I know you've worked in other cities.
So I've seen economic development fund used in many, many different ways. Economic development really incorporates multiple things. It could be the marketing of the community itself. It could be the support of small businesses for expansion and retention. It could be used as an incentive for a larger business to be located here. It could be for a comprehensive plan that guides future development in order to draw more both residential and commercial development ultimately. So there are many different ways that this pot of funding could be used. And I know that there has been some discussion about a comprehensive land use study and a comprehensive plan. Something like this, for example, could be funded out of the Economic Development Authority Fund by virtue of this really sets up the community for growth and development in the future. So again, every city does it a little different. Some are using it for marketing purposes. The fishing tournaments are a little more like marketing. But ultimately, what you want is a solid return on investment where you can show we're investing this, therefore we're getting 2 new employees, or we're getting a whole new company, or we're getting XYZ sales tax from a new establishment, retail establishment or commercial establishment, or it is manufacturing and it brings living wage jobs, which again draws people to Eufaula. So there are so many different ways this money could be used.
Good answer. We used to have like minimal grants for new signage for new businesses, things like that. Do we still have those?
We do.
We do. Okay. So that would be economic development, correct?
So is that being marketed to our businesses? Just curious, because I did have someone ask me about that today.
It is, and when we do it every year, we used to do it through the chamber. We've taken it in-house the last year, but Andrea and I put together the packet and she walked down and handed it to every business. Now, I can't guarantee that business was open that day.
Right.
Can I ask, and maybe you know this, when does our contract with the fishing tournaments end?
That is a very good question. I actually slated that for the June agenda.
Okay.
Because
Gotcha. Just
it
jumping
needs
ahead.
to be discussed. Again, return on investment is a question that needs to be asked, and that agreement should probably be discussed among the city council.
Until next time. Okay, got it. All right, we would like to open this up for a public hearing. If there are any comments, questions, concerns?
I don't have any questions. In the past, I get it that we used all of it on the fishing tournaments, which seems excessive, and all of our eggs in one basket. But I've seen this in the last year or two. You've seen the Casey's come in, you see the new Dollar General, you see that the Creek are putting in the casino and the hotel, and you see the Allsups. Were any of those businesses marketed to bring them here, or did they do it on their own? And if they weren't marketed to, why didn't we?
Unfortunately, that is a question I cannot answer. I was not here at the time.
I know that Casey's we did contact Casey's and Allsups, and we did ask them to come in. We've been talking to Casey's and Allsups for more than a couple of years. This has been something that started when City Manager Jacob Foose was here. He initially started those conversations and reached out. And so it's something that's been a progressive thing. So it wasn't something that happened overnight. So yes, they were reached out to and they were talked to. And so did we have to provide them money to come here? We did not.
And that was my next question is, did we have to give them a tax break or provide them with funds to come here? Any of the businesses that have come in?
Well, I'm a member of the Creek Nation and also Eufaula Indian community. And of course, we're not going to get much benefit from the casino taxes or anything other than them buying something in Eufaula. So that is the Creek Nation. And
I know.
the intent at one time was at Fountainhead that they were going to put in a hotel, motel, casino there. But after years on traffic count and everything, they thought it was best to put the casino here. Eufaula Indian Community, we had 9 acres where it's located at now. The Eufaula Indian community owned that. And so that they took that property. And so we didn't get any benefits from that.
Right.
The
So
community did.
I can see at this point, Eufaula is growing west. We don't have any, we can't go any other
We're
direction.
lake locked.
We have to go west.
Yeah.
There's no, I mean, let's be smart about it. We're lake locked and we can't go that way. We can't go that way. We have to go west. Are there any businesses that we're marketing to bring hotels? I mean, the Creek Nation, I get it. And it's a great facility, but there's 132 rooms, 135, whatever it is. That's not a lot of rooms when you look at the amount of tourism that we have. Are there any marketing strategies that are going towards other businesses to bring them?
The part,
So beyond answering the
Yeah,
question
I was about to
while
say,
the
I think we
cards, is there another question?
No.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we are supposed to, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I had something here. Go ahead.
If there are no more comments, then we
Yeah.
can close it.
Yeah. Are there any other comments? Okay. We'll close the public hearing.
Similar to something I said earlier about the community really ought to look at a comprehensive
Yes, that's where I was going.
plan and a comprehensive land use study, because driving development, we currently have no solid plan on how the community should grow. North, west, whichever way, just not into the lake. That is definitely something that would move economic development forward, having that solid plan, because it also shows businesses or hotels or other parties that are interested in coming here. We do have a plan for infrastructure extension, infrastructure provision to begin with, because everybody who comes here, a new residential development, if there's not an 8-inch water main that reaches to that new development,
Yeah.
they're a fish dead in the water before they ever get started. So the comprehensive planning and land use study is really that first step to drive economic development forward.
And I know when I was on the planning and zoning committee, that's one of the things that we wished we had, because it puts everybody in the whole entire community on the same page exactly where and how we want development in a city. And that way there's no also, hey, well, this is what we wish would have went there, but then now someone asked for a special variance and all kinds of things. And so it puts everyone on the same page as well. So,
And I would say, just as a comment, that being in business development myself, if you don't have a plan, you are planning to fail at some point. So, and we do have an economic development person here within the city, a paid employee, correct?
We do.
Okay, so my suggestion would definitely be that we get with them and the new manager, since you won't be with us, to make sure that going forward, we have that plan. And I'm sure there's other people that'll need to be part of that. But
any other comments? No. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Councilor Gelman,
Yes.
Mayor Whitman,
Yes.
Councilor Barton.
yes.
Vice Mayor Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, now moving on to our regular scheduled city council meeting. Item line number 4, consideration of acceptance, approval, adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement to move into executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B1 related to discussing the employment, hiring, appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or resignation of any individual salaried public officer or employee, and specifically to conduct interviews with qualified candidates for the interim city manager position, discuss the appointment of an individual to serve in this role and set salary.
I'll make a motion to go to executive session.
I'll second.
Counselor Billy,
Yes.
Mayor Hickman,
Yes.
Counselor Barton.
Yes.
Mayor Morgan, Vice Mayor Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, we will move into executive session.
Tisha just became mayor.
Yeah. We'll have co-mayors.